Greetings, mortals. My name's Desilas Drake, and this is Valkyria Chronicles review. Valkyria Chronicles is an older game. It came out actually a couple years ago for PlayStation, but now as PC people get it, so woo! Valkyria Chronicles is an elegant blend of turn-based strategy, role-playing, and third-person shooter, with a very big emphasis on story and character. Now, those three things sound like they wouldn't play well together, but surprisingly, this game does it pretty well. So let's talk first of all about the story and setting. It takes place in a fantasy version of World War II Europe. It's very neat, and I don't think that we see this enough in games. World War II is really great setting to tell some pretty gritty stories, and this one does it very well. So brief synopsis, there's this small neutral country called Gallia. It's being invaded by the Empire, which is at war with the Federation. The Empire is sort of this pseudo-German Russia force, whereas the Federation basically takes the place of the Allies. The game follows the experiences of a junior Gallian officer and his squad as they fight to ensure their country's freedom. So basically, you're Poland. Overall, the various characters are written in a way that's relatable and engaging, but the game avoids relying too much on stereotypical anime characters, well, for the main ones anyway. I really like the way the game handles the villains. It takes the time to portray them as people, both the leaders and the common soldiers. You can see them as individuals. You can see their motivations. You can see their flaws, and you can even see some good qualities out of them. It manages to do this without actually whitewashing the villainous acts they do, because they are villains. Now, this nuance in their character portrayal is very important because the game doesn't shy away from some of the really awful stuff that happened in actual World War II. It portrays it in a way that shows it honor and makes you think about what happened. For example, the racism and bigotry that characterized a lot of countries' involvement in World War II, it even shows concentration camps and racial cleansing. It handles it with a lot of gravity and a lot of seriousness that these issues deserve. It is kind of interesting how they did it, showing the black-haired, sort of Japanese-looking dark-skinned people as the stand-in for the oppressed minorities of World War II. It is kind of unfortunate, but, well, they had to pick some race. Overall, though, it is really good how they do it, and it makes a very interesting statement. I think it was a general success, despite the interesting choices. So now let's talk about gameplay. The game is basically broken up into two types of play, book mode and battles. The book mode is basically like watching an anime. You watch various cutscenes. They're pretty short, usually about 5 minutes at most, 2 at least. There's about 10 to 12 scenes per chapter. Each scene itself is self-contained, and there's quite a bit of progression through the stories. Sometimes you get a choice to watch extra scenes, but you progress from one to the next. Once per chapter, you'll have a battle, and that is the second part of the game. The battle is basically a set-piece engagement. You deploy your units, engage in the turn-based strategy portion of the game. Each story mission can be played once, but you can also unlock skirmish battles that you can play over and over again to gain extra experience and cash. Combat is basically turn-based strategy, but there is some difference, and that's where the third-person shooter aspect comes in. First off, unlike other RPGs where each unit you control gets to take one action per player turn, instead you get a set amount of command points every turn. These you expend as you activate your units and move them about. You can also expend them to give buffs, which are called orders, or you can call in reinforcements should some of your forces fall in battle. One action consists of both a movement and an attack. Now, the attack can be taken any time during the movement. This is very good, which means you can pop out of cover, take a shot, and then jump back into cover so that your unit doesn't get blown away by return fire. This is all very straightforward, except for one major caveat. You can give more than one action to any unit per turn. In fact, if you want, you can spend pretty much all of your action points on a single movement, or on a single unit, as they move around and attack. There is a limitation. the more often you utilize that unit, the less movement they will have per time you use them. It does have diminishing returns eventually. Getting A ranks on missions often requires the pooling of your action points on just a few units so that you can quickly achieve your objective. Now, this approach to combat is more realistic than your average JRPG, but don't expect it to feel like a gritty war simulator like the Company of Heroes games. Cover is very important also. Enemies will take pot shots if you run into their attack range. And they can't shoot at you if you're behind a wall or if you're taking cover behind tanks or big vehicles. Controlling your own tank, well, it does kind of feel like a tank. It's big, it's powerful, it's really slow. Shooting it is, well, the attack action works exactly the same way as any other unit. You fire, there's a chance to hit, there's a chance to miss. Running over enemy units with your tank is one of the most satisfying moments of gameplay. It doesn't actually cause damage, but it can definitely break up an enemy defensive position really easily. Basically, you take aim, then your unit empties their clip at your aim point, and then the guy you shoot at, if you hit him and if he's still alive, gets a chance to return fire. Headshots are important because they do critical damage for extra. Secondly, while it's definitely an RPG, it's not straightforward turn-based tactical game. The RPG elements do take a back seat to the tactical aspect. Leveling up your character gives nice bonuses. It makes them harder to kill, makes them better at what they're doing, and also unlocks secondary weapons, orders, and also character bonuses known as potentials. It also gives them a small boost to hit points. But you can easily complete the game without any of this optional stuff, and the XP you earn in story missions will be sufficient to beat the game without grinding those skirmish battles. But if you really want to get those A ranks, definitely grind the skirmish battles. So let's talk about the units we have in combat. First off, we have the Scout. That's basically, it is what it sounds like. The Scout is armed with a medium-range, semi-automatic rifle. It has hand grenades, and they have a small ragnade canister, which is used for healing themselves and other units. Later on, they unlock under-barrel-mounted grenade launchers. They have a huge reserve of action points, so they are your primary long-range reconnaissance unit. They only wear light armor, though. It's to increase their mobility. So don't have them be out in front taking a lot of fire, or they will go down very quickly. They're relatively weak in that effect, but they make up for their shortcomings with their long-range primary weapon, and that grenade launcher that they unlock later, really good for breaking up enemy units. The Scout also has excellent peripheral vision, and they can intercept enemies from long range. They have an evade action, which allows them to duck enemy fire, and counterattack. And they also are able to launch cooperative assaults with adjacent allied units. The second unit is the Sniper. Although this is another standard unit to the genre, sniper units are armed with bolt-action rifles fitted with a telescopic sight, and has, once again, a small ragnate canister for healing. Their role on the battlefield is the elimination of key units. Having a sniper in the right spot can make all the difference in a battle. They do possess a huge potential to fire on enemy infantry units over a very long range. They have the lowest action pool, and their hit points are tiny, and they have practically no defense whatsoever. So be very careful where you end them up, because they cannot take fire. They do have the ability to evade, but they can't reaction fire on enemy combatants entering their line of sight. They don't counterattack, and they do not launch cooperative assaults with adjacent allied units. They also lack explosive weapons, so you're best to use them to pick off enemies from afar and then run them back into cover. Next, we have the Engineer. This one is a very versatile unit. They have the standard rifle. They can also equip carbines or pistols. They carry many grenades, which is very useful for destroying enemy defensive positions. And they have ragnate canisters and tools. Their big role is a support role for the units. They can repair damage to tanks, they can rearm spent munitions, they can heal wounded infantry units, they can disarm mines, which can damage your tank or your infantry, depending on the mine type. They can rebuild collapsed or damaged barricades. Though they have fairly poor accuracy, and they're not very good with their rifles. They're pretty low damage, and they have even lower defensive abilities. They are very useful in their niche. This is, once again, a unit that you want to keep safe, pull them out, use them, and then pull them back into safety again. The fourth unit is the most common. That's Shock Trooper. Shock Troopers are basically your heavily armed grunt infantry. They have good armor. They are very good at anti-infantry combat. You'll find them especially useful in the urban and trench maps. And they're going to be the ones that you run into the most. Shock Troopers have high defensive and offensive abilities, particularly against entrenched troops and fortifications. They are armed with a assault rifle, which fires 30 rounds, which is very effective, once again, at infantry, especially if you're getting headshots. They don't have great range with those guns, and their peripheral vision is not as good as a scout, but their greater survivability and their ability to intercept units quickly and put them down real fast makes them very advantageous. Their mobility is average, and their action points are pretty average. They do have the ability to evade. Their ability to intercept enemy units with their Overwatch is very good. Their counterattack is up very punishing. And their ability to launch cooperative assaults with adjacent allied units makes lining up a firing squad of shock troopers very effective. The final unit in the game is its most unique. It's called the Lancer. He's essentially your RPG unit. During World War II, they had anti-tank RPG troops, known as Grenadiers. This is basically the Valkyria Chronicles equivalent of that. Armed with high-power launchers carrying different warheads, and they also have the Ragnate canisters for healing. They are equipped with a blast shield, which prevents them from taking damage, or large amounts of damage, from HE and mortar rounds. They are protected from mines and also excessive cannon fire. They have a huge hit point pool. Their attacks are very good against armored vehicles, especially if you can get them into a position where they can launch an attack on a weak spot on the armor or a weakness on the back of the tank. They have few action points because their heavy armor weighs them down, and they don't have any weapon other than their Lancer, so they can't intercept enemy units, counterattack, or launch cooperative assaults. But playing a Lancer good allows you to quickly clear a path even through a whole bunch of tanks. So combat in the game. The gameplay itself, as far as combat goes, it's very unforgiving. You have to think on your feet as the battle unfolds. But it does reward you for thinking outside the box, and it does allow for multiple solutions to situations. It does definitely have a this is the best way to play the game scenario, and it will tell you if you picked the right one or not, but there's more than one way to win. Talking about the AI in the game. It's not great, but it's not horrible either. There are moments when enemy soldiers will do something incredibly stupid, but usually this is what I think to be a scripted event that's meant to teach you something about the gameplay mechanics itself. So most of the time, the AI in the game does its job pretty well, providing you with a somewhat of a challenge. Now let's talk about something that Valkyria Chronicles does really great, and that's the visual style and aesthetic of the game. It has a very distinct, beautiful art style. It blends in cell shading with the detail of a watercolor painting, and it adds over this sketch effect that makes everything look like a hand-drawn portrait. It is excellent. That, combined with the great music, its visual aesthetic is wonderful. It really captures and fits the feel of World War II. There's quite a bit of detail that's lost because of that hand-drawn visual effect, but that's a good thing, I think, because it looks amazing, and it looks like something that someone has drawn out to recount you this tale. Let's talk now about tutorials. Valkyria Chronicles does a decent job of informing you how the basic gameplay works and how to play it. Don't expect it to go out of its way to assist you when you get into trouble. There are quite a few different occasions when there is a definite lack of information about the mission you're about to engage in, and you're just really going to have to use your brain and devise a very good strategy for your units, especially if you want to get that A rank on missions. There's several missions which can be very frustrating if it's the first time you've played through them, and suddenly something happens and just completely throws a massive monkey wrench into your plans. Suddenly you're losing units left and right. You have no clue what's going on. It can be very frustrating. However, if you overcome those problems, you feel amazing because you have pulled victory out of the jaws of defeat in that situation. Valkyria Chronicles is definitely stable, and you'll very seldom encounter bugs. There is every once in a while a little glitch where a unit you kill will havoc itself into a sandbag or into a wall in a weird position and then sort of jump to a different spot so that it can be more in the field of play, because recovering downed units is a big gameplay mechanic that you want to take advantage of. So I wouldn't necessarily call that a bug, just kind of a jarring visual jump. So now let's talk about the value of it. It's on sale on Steam for $20, and I would say that at this price, it's definitely worth every penny. This game is for hardcore turn-based strategy game players. It's for people who are looking for a definite mental challenge. If you're a big fan of turn-based strategy, you're looking for a strategy game that has that interesting turn-based strategy mechanic, but also blends it with a third-person shooter in a very effective way, this is a good game to play. Assuming you can handle that challenge, because like I said, it is very unforgiving. Valkyria Chronicles is brilliant. It's engrossing. It's definitely not for the impatient. Its unique art style is great. Its heavy emphasis on story is very well told, and it's got a lot of content to explore. This game will be sure to draw you into the world. It's a great fit for PC gamers who will hopefully give this game the respect it deserves, because it was definitely underappreciated when it was released on PS3. So, thanks. That's your review. Thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Tell us what you thought about the game. Did you like it? Did you hate it? If so, why? Until next time, this is Drake.